Well, it happened, ladies and gentlemen. Shane Gillis has been fired, and the streets are now a safer place. Now I don't have to worry about nobody coming through my TV box and saying words I don't like. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. So it happened. I talked about it 2 days ago. Shane Gillis, one of the newest members of SNL, otherwise known as Saturday Night Live, has been fired. The other day he was just in trouble. They were deciding what they wanted to do about it, I'm sure. They waited until Monday so they could get maximum press on firing him. I'm sure that was part of it. Nothing in this industry is unplanned when it comes to that kind of thing. And I saw both sides of the argument. Some people were making it sound like now everything was going to be a safer place in comedy. Makes no sense at all. And then I saw some people acting like this was horrible for comedy. Makes no sense at all either. Really, if you ask me, this can make comedy a better situation, or the situation when it comes to comedy better, because what can happen with somebody like Shane Gillis, if he's smart, is right now he's got a lot of press around him. So if he wants to, he can put out his own sketch type ideas, and if they're funny, then people are going to watch them because right now he has so much buzz about him. He was trending for the entire weekend on Twitter, and I'm sure on Facebook everybody was talking about him too. I don't really pay attention to Facebook like that anymore, even though I do post on it and occasionally comment on a friend's status. I'm not really up on what's going on Facebook. But when it comes to Twitter, I know that he was trending. Everybody was talking about him. So this is where comics can start to take their destiny into their own hands, as far as I'm concerned. Like, people complain about there not being a Mad TV anymore, or a Chappelle show, or any of the shows that people really liked, you know? And the thing with that is, now with YouTube, here we are, or several of the other avenues there's Twitch, there's Patreon, there's so many different places for people to put out good content, that if you have something that people will pay attention to, that people actually like, you have the power to produce that on your own. And I don't think that Shane Gillis is necessarily broke. He was a working comic as far as I know, so he probably has a little bit of capital and could do his own thing. I talked to a friend of mine who was formerly a New York comic, very, very good comic. And he said that Shane Gillis is actually a really funny guy, which I hadn't known that before, like I said in the last video, which I'll end up putting right here. I heard from that comic that he's actually a really funny guy, but that he was surprised that SNL chose him in the first place because he's always been edgy. So with that being the case, it's like, if he's already funny, which I said that I didn't think his appearance on that podcast, or maybe it was his own podcast, I'm not sure whose podcast it was, but on that podcast I didn't necessarily find that funny. But if you were to listen to my podcast, Unbothered by Rivera, most of the time I don't try to be funny on that podcast. I just try to talk about whatever it is that's going on in my life. Like on these, I don't necessarily try to be funny. If I say something funny, great. If not, we just had a quick conversation. You got to hear what my thoughts were on a particular issue, and that's all it is. So I don't go out of my way to try to be edgy. I can see how some white comics would try that right now, because it's kind of hard to stand out when you're a white comic right now. You know, they don't have a lot of stuff they can talk about as far as the social justice warriors go. And I can see how that would make it so they're like always trying to push the envelope. Then you get hit up by NBC, or you find out they're doing auditions and you're like, I'm great at sketch. So you go and you audition for it, not thinking you can get it, because I don't think most of us really think we're going to get it when we go out for things like that. But you're assuming I'll just throw my hat in the ring and see what happens. And then you get it. Then all of a sudden people start exposing you for things you've said in the past, which as comics, we've all said things in the past that could get us in trouble. It's just a matter of whether or not somebody wants to dig through our archives and see what it is they can find that's going to be offensive. And you can try to scrub the internet of that stuff, but it's probably not going to be the most effective. I also find it hard to believe that SNL didn't see this coming on any level, because if you remember a couple years back, I think it might have been 2016 or right around there, Melissa Villaseñor is a comic that got picked for Saturday Night Live. And they went through all her old tweets and they found some that they considered to be racist or at least questionable. And they ended up weathering that storm with her, and Melissa Villaseñor, I believe, is still on Saturday Night Live. Melissa Villaseñor is somebody I've known for a long time. I remember when she first started doing comedy. And when I talk about my friends in comedy, don't think I'm name dropping, because to me, they're not even names to drop. They're just comics that I happen to know because I was on the LA scene for a long time. And when you're on the LA scene for a long time, you end up meeting a lot of comics, and some of them end up getting picked for stuff, getting cast in different things. So you just know these people. Most comics that would watch this wouldn't think I'm name dropping. The average person might be like, he's always talking about these people like they're his friends. Well, Melissa Villaseñor, actual friend. When I saw her after that situation, I whispered in her ear, aren't you that racist comic from SNL? And she was like, oh my God. And like, the funny thing about that is Melissa Villaseñor, if you know her, is such a sweet, nice girl. And I know what happened with Melissa Villaseñor, not from talking to her, but from just knowing her. She was hanging out at the Comedy Store when she put out those tweets, which are like 4 years before she got booked on SNL. And when you're hanging out at the Comedy Store, if you're not familiar, it's got an edgy and a dark vibe at the Comedy Store. So a nice girl like Melissa Villaseñor, I'm sure, was just trying to fit in and thought like, hey, maybe if I say some edgy stuff, then I'll fit in better around here, which she is a Comedy Store regular, but you're always trying to fit in when you're a comic. Not necessarily me, because I was an outcast from the beginning. People are very nice to me now, but I had to earn my way in because I'm gay and Mexican, and that was a lot for people to wrap their heads around when I first came on the scene in 2003. It was a different landscape. People weren't as politically correct, and for me, that ended up working out in my favor. But when it comes to a comic like Melissa Villaseñor, I think she just wanted to blend and mix with the other comics, so she thought, well, maybe if I say these edgy things, I'll fit in better. And so that's what ended up happening. People were trying to ruin her life. I took that very personally because we're always talking about diversity and how we need more people of color in these positions, and then somebody gets one, and it was another person of color that exposed her for these old tweets, which like, if you go back and search it, you can see what it was, but the tweets were very benign. They weren't even racist, in my opinion, and maybe I've got a skewed perception of things because I do edgy humor, but I just didn't consider them to be at all racist. I mean, like, were they questionable in taste? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think that you have to call a person's entire character into question just because they say something that maybe you wouldn't say. And so I find it hard to believe that the people at Saturday Night Live didn't consider this at all, didn't go searching on the internet, don't have a department that handles that, you know, that goes through people's social media. I know when I did the stand-up NBC, they asked for your social media handles. And so if they ask for your social media handles, I would assume that they end up going through your social media and kind of checking it out and seeing if you're a safe bet or not. That's what I would imagine. Major network like NBC doesn't have a department taking care of that, or doesn't have anybody on that job at all. Doesn't make sense to me at all. I think what happened was they thought this was going to happen. They'd get the charge off of it, you know, the quick press off of it, and then they would end up weathering the storm with Shane Gillis, just like they did with Melissa Villaseñor. Then they get a bunch of people watching because they want to see this guy fall on his face, and everything goes through. He's great. Everything works out. Shane Gillis is now a member of Saturday Night Live, and they got that bit of press for it. But instead, people went absolutely nuts and were like, we have to have this guy canceled. And then people started with the, there was even a hashtag like, Fire Shane NBC, or SNL Fire Shane, something like that. I remember seeing it on Twitter just today. And so, you know, it is what it is, and that's what's going on. And if you ask me, it's neither a blow to comedy or a win for the SJW community. I think things like this can be a really good experience, like I said, just as far as teaching comics. Don't rely on the networks, because the networks are going to leave you hanging out to dry. So you might as well just do your own thing, figure out how it is you're going to monetize what it is you're doing, how you're going to get your ideas and your voice out there without using NBC. Don't rely on any network, because they are all going to leave you hanging out to dry. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.